Hello student, myself Dr. Tanushree Chatterjee from Raipur Institute of Technology welcome you all in SWAYAM course of Fundamental of Computational Biology. Today I will tell about the modeling of respiration at cellular level. So, how do living things release energy? Most of energy used through conversion of ATP molecules into ADP molecules. Thus, cells must continually convert ADP molecules back into ATP molecules. So, in this way the cell release energy. Now, what is breathing and what is cellular respiration? We all breathe. What is breathing? Breathing is a physical process that allows animals and human beings to come into contact with gases in the air as we breathe. And what is cellular respiration? Chemical processes that releases energy from organic compound, that is for example food, gradually converting it into energy that is stored in ATP molecules. I am giving you one example. For example, analyzing a campfire can clarify your understanding of cellular respiration. A campfire breaks chemical bonds in wood. You must have seen it, releasing stored energy as light and heat, right. Like that, cellular respiration breaks chemical bonds in glucose, releasing stored energy and transferring some of 38 ATP, some energy is lost as heat. In chemical pathways, food is raw material that provides the energy for your body to function. Cells use food to synthesize new molecules to carry out their life processes. Cells do not burn glucose, they slowly release energy from it and other food compounds through several pathways, or you can say the several processes. In first pathway, that is glycolysis. The glycolysis, it releases only a small amount of energy, that is 2 net ATP. If oxygen present, it will lead to 2 other pathways that release a lot of energy, Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. If oxygen absent, glucose is followed by a different pathway. For example, alcoholic fermentation or lactic acid fermentation. Now, what is cellular respiration? In presence of oxygen, that means we can say it aerobic. So, what is aerobic glycolysis? In Krebs cycle you can see electron transport pathway. In both the cycle you can see the aerobic cellular respiration in the presence of oxygen, Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. In this pictorial representation you can see the process. This is Krebs cycle, Now, one by one step I will explain you in the first step, second step and third step one by one I will take and I will explain you the Krebs cycle. All three combined make up cellular respiration, that is glycolysis, Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. Process that releases energy by breaking down food molecules in the presence of oxygen. Equation of cellular respiration you can see here 6O2 plus C6H12O6. So, we can get 6 carbon dioxide plus 6 molecule of water plus energy, that is ATP. Oxygen plus glucose, that will give carbon dioxide plus water plus energy. You can see here the all three stages of Krebs cycle here. So, each of these three stages captures some of the chemical energy available in the food molecules and use it to produce ATP. Process take place in the cytosol of the cytoplasm outside of mitochondria, converts glucose with the help of 2 ATP molecules and eventually releases 4 ATP molecules for a net gain of 2 ATP molecules. So, this is the process of glycolysis. You can see in cytoplasm or cystole. So, what is cytosol? Cytosol is the fluid and that is suspended molecules of salt, sugar, amino acid, enzyme, etc. So, cytosol is a fluid and that is suspended molecules of salt, sugar, amino acid and enzyme, etc. around the organelle. And cytoplasm, we all know the cytosol plus the organelles suspended within it, that is everything except the nucleus. So, cell is plasma membrane plus cytoplasm plus nucleus, and in cytoplasm cytosol plus organelles is there. Now, we will see step one by one in ATP and NADH production in glycolysis. In step 1, it breaks one molecule of glucose in half, producing 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, that is a 3 carbon compound. In step 2, 2 NAD plus electron carrier accepts 4 high energy electrons, transfers them to 2 NADH molecules and 2 hydrogen ion, thus passing the energy stored in the glucose. Step 3, 4 ADP added producing 4 ATP. In step 4, 2 remaining pyruvic acid enter Krebs cycle in presence of oxygen. If no oxygen, another pathway is followed. Here you can see the 2 ATP used up to become 2 ADP and then 4 ATP produced, net gain is 2 ATP. So, 2 ADP NADH plus 2 hydrogen ion is produced. Glycolysis is a fast process. Cells produce thousands of ATP molecules in a few milliseconds. Glycolysis alone does not require oxygen. It can supply chemical energy to cells where the oxygen is not available. However, if a cell generates large amount of ATP from glycolysis, it can run into problem. A cells available to NAD molecules become filled up with electrons. Glycolysis shutdown cannot proceed without available NAD molecules and ATP production stops. Now, anaerobic to aerobic respiration. Glycolysis evolved before the other stages of cellular respiration. Other stages need oxygen. No oxygen in earth atmosphere when life first evolved about 3.5 to 4 billion year ago. And without oxygen, anaerobic respiration, that is 2 or 3 billion year ago, oxygen was gradually added to the atmosphere by early photosynthetic bacteria. Period the oxygen catastrophe, that is aerobic organism. Now, we all know the structure of mitochondria. Mitochondrion has two separate membrane, inner and outer membrane. We have already studied the structure of the mitochondria having three compartments: inner membrane, space, cristae within it, space and matrix. See the structure of the mitochondria, cristae, here you can see here very clear, a matrix also. In anaerobic respiration, the Krebs cycle and electron transport, end of the glycolysis, 90% of chemical energy from glucose is still unused, locked in high energy electrons of pyruvic acid. Extracted by world's most powerful electron receptor. Krebs and electron transport require oxygen, thus they are aerobic processes. Extracted by world's most powerful electron receptor, that is oxygen. Krebs and electron transport require oxygen, thus they are aerobic processes. In Krebs cycle, second stage of cellular respiration, that is named after Hans Krebs, British biochemist, in 1937. Here pyruvic acid is broken down into carbon dioxide in a series of energy extracting reactions. Citric acid is the first compound formed in this series of reactions. So, Krebs is sometimes called the citric acid or citric acid cycle. So, here you can see in this pictorial representation the whole citric acid cycle, or you can say it Krebs. So, in this cycle pyruvic acid enters from glycolysis, one carbon removed and carbon dioxide form. NAD again changed to NADH, coenzyme A joins remaining 2 carbon atom, that is acetyl coenzyme A. Now, acetyl coenzyme A added to 4 carbon compound and make 6 carbon citric acid. Now, citric acid then broken down to 5 carbon, then 4 carbon, more carbon dioxide released. Along the way, more NADH and FADH2 form. One molecule of ATP also made 2 turns and 2 pyruvic acid from glycolysis yield. 10 NADH, 2 from glycolysis, 2 FADH2 and 4 ATP from glycolysis. So, cycle start anew. Now, what are the uses for products of the Krebs cycle? Here the carbon dioxide is exhaled, that means that is the waste product, and ATP can be used for cellular activities. High energy electrons stored in NADH and FADH2 can be used to make huge amount of ATP in the presence of oxygen. Electrons from Krebs cycle are passed to electron transport chain by NADH and FADH2. At the end of chain, an enzyme combines electrons from the electron change with hydrogen ion and oxygen to form water. Each time 2 high energy electrons transport down the electron chain, their energy is used to transport hydrogen ion across the membrane. Hydrogen ion built up in intermembrane space, it is now positively charged, other side of membrane negatively charged. You can see here electrochemical gradient, that is chemoosmotic gradient created for ATP synthase to work, that is off. ATP synthase converts ADP into ATP, that is display. This is the whole mitochondrial electron transport chain. The total ATP production of aerobic cycle, how much chemical energy comes from one molecule of glucose, that is absence of oxygen, only 2 ATP molecules from glycolysis, in presence of oxygen, 2 net ATP molecule from glycolysis, 36 more ATP molecule from Krebs cycle and electron transport pathway. These 38 ATP molecules represent 38% of the total energy of glucose, remaining 62% is released as heat. Thus, your body level warmer after vigorous exercise and does not freeze in winter. The total ATP production of aerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration, or you can say it fermentation. This occurs after glycolysis when oxygen absent, thus anaerobic processes. Fermentation releases energy from food molecules in absence of oxygen. In this process, cells convert NADH to NAD by passing high energy electrons back to pyruvic acid. Now, glycolysis has NAD and can continue producing ATP. There are two types of fermentation, alcoholic fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. Anaerobic and aerobic respiration share the glycolysis pathway. If oxygen is absent, fermentation may take place, producing lactic acid or ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. Products of fermentation still contain chemical energy and are used widely to make foods and fuels. In alcoholic fermentation, yeast and a few other microorganisms use alcoholic fermentation, forming ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide as waste. Equation for alcoholic fermentation is pyruvic acid plus 2 plus NADH. So, we can get the ethyl alcohol, carbon dioxide and NAD. And alcoholic fermentation occurs in yeast. Now, next one is the lactic acid fermentation. Many cells convert accumulated pyruvic acid from glycolysis to lactic acid. Lactic acid fermentation regenerates NAD, so glycolysis can continue. So, equation for the lactic acid fermentation is pyruvic acid plus NADH. So, we can get the lactic acid plus NAD. When your body cannot supply enough oxygen to muscles, tissues during exercise, this is produced. Without oxygen, the body is unable to produce all the ATP it requires. So, lactic acid fermentation takes over. And lactic acid fermentation occurs in humans. Running, swimming or riding a bike as fast as you can. So, large muscles in your legs and arms that quickly run out of oxygen, muscles begin to rapidly produce ATP by lactic acid fermentation. You can see in this pictorial representation the cycling, running, swimming here. The built up of lactic acid fermentation causes a painful burning sensation, making your muscles feel sore. Initially, body uses ATP which is already available in muscles. Then new ATP made by lactic acid fermentation and cellular respiration. Eventually, energy supply runs out and for quick energy, ATP in muscles only lasts a few seconds. And second one is ATP from lactic acid fermentation lasts about 90 seconds. Then creates a byproduct, that is lactic acid, which the body must get rid of. The body releases it by panting heavily, that is intake of oxygen. For long term energy, exercise lasting longer than 90 seconds utilizes cellular respiration to generate a continuous supply of ATP. Cellular respiration releases energy slower than fermentation. Thus, athletes can pace themselves. Body stores energy in muscles and tissues in the form of glycogen. Stores of glycogen usually last for 15 to 20 minutes of activity. then the body start to break down other molecules like fat for energy. How long do you need to active before you start to burn fat? That is 70 to 22 minutes. Now, what are the advantages of aerobic respiration? Having major advantages of aerobic respiration. Here, the more energy released, enough energy to produce up 38 ATP. And the advantages of anaerobic respiration is, lets organism live in places where there is a little or no oxygen, and quickly they produces ATP. Now, what is the relationship between cellular respiration and photosynthesis? Equation for the cellular respiration you can see here, and the equation for photosynthesis. We can get energy through sunlight in photosynthesis, then oxygen and glucose. This is the difference between the photosynthesis and cellular respiration. The summary: in the way 2 or 3 billion ago, since photosynthesis added oxygen to earth atmosphere, life has become mostly aerobic. Some organism and type of cells retain the older aerobic pathway for making ATP. These pathways comprise anaerobic respiration or fermentation. Muscle cells can continue to produce ATP when oxygen runs low using lactic acid fermentation, but muscle fatigue and pain may result. Both alcoholic and lactic acid fermentation pathways change pyruvate in order to continue producing ATP by glycolysis. Aerobic respiration is for more energy efficient than anaerobic respiration. Aerobic processes produce up to 38 ATP per glucose. Anaerobic processes yield only 2 ATP per glucose. So, in summary we can say, or in conclusion, the glycolysis and TCA cycle can be mathematically modeled using rate equations for glucose uptake. It is having wide application in the field of flux balance analysis, resource allocation models and optimization models.